The fence post snapped clean through under David's hammer and he swore quietly. Third one this week. The wood from the local mills never seemed to cure properly in New Hebron's humid air. He wiped sweat from his forehead and squinted at the eastern field where his corn was finally starting to come in. 2 years of failed crops, 2 years of debt, but this season looked promising. Maybe he could finally stop eating protein paste for dinner. A sound like thunder rolled across the sky, but there were no clouds. David looked up just in time to see something streak overhead, trailing smoke and fire. It wasn't thunder. It was a ship, and it was falling fast. The crash shook the ground beneath his feet. David dropped his hammer and ran toward the smoke rising from beyond his northern property line. His boots pounded against the dry earth as he jumped the irrigation ditch and pushed through the tall grass that marked where his farm ended and the wild began. He found the wreckage in a shallow crater. The vessel was small, maybe a personal shuttle or escape pod. Pieces of hull were scattered across 50 meters, still glowing hot. The design was strange, all curves and organic shapes instead of the angular human craft he was used to. And then he saw them. 2 shapes lay in the grass. Not human. Definitely not human. David approached slowly, his heart hammering. Dragons. He had seen pictures in the colonial briefings, but never in person. Most dragons stayed far from human space. These 2 were young, maybe teenagers if dragons aged anything like humans. One had copper-colored scales that caught the afternoon light. The other was smaller, with scales like polished silver. Both were breathing, but barely. Their clothes were torn and burned. The copper one had a gash along his ribs that was leaking dark blood. The silver one's wing was bent at a wrong angle. David stood there for a long moment. Every practical bone in his body said to walk away. Call the colonial authorities. Let them handle it. Dragons were dangerous, everyone said so. And he had his own problems. His own struggles, but then the smaller one opened her eyes. They were golden, like sunrise, and filled with such fear that David felt something crack inside his chest. She tried to speak, but only managed a weak sound that might have been a word in a language he didn't know. Okay, David said quietly, more to himself than to her. Okay, stay calm. I'm going to help. He ran back to his farm and returned with his truck, a medical kit, and every blanket he owned. Loading them was difficult. The copper one alone probably weighed as much as David did. But fear gave them strength, and between the 3 of them they managed. David drove them to his barn, not his house. If anyone came looking, at least he could claim he didn't know they were there. He set them up in the back section where he used to keep livestock, before he sold everything to pay for his wife's funeral. He cleaned their wounds as best he could with antiseptic and bandages meant for humans. The copper one hissed in pain but didn't pull away. The silver one watched him with those golden eyes, still afraid but less so. My name is David, he said, pointing to himself. David. The silver one touched her chest with a clawed hand. Les, she whispered in heavily accented Galactic common. She pointed to the copper one. Ren, brother. Ren and Les, David repeated. You're safe here. I won't hurt you. Liz said something in her own language, too fast for David to catch. Then she tried again in common. Scourge. The scourge came. Family scattered, we flew. Ships chased us, crashed. David had heard about the scourge. Every human colony had. Some kind of alien invasion tearing through multiple systems. Millions dead, whole planets burned. The news made it sound distant, someone else's problem. Looking at these 2 terrified kids, it suddenly felt very real. You need food, David said. And water. I'll get some. He brought them water first, which they drank desperately. Then he raided his kitchen. He had been planning to make stew last the week, but he brought the whole pot instead. The dragons ate like they hadn't seen food in days. They probably hadn't. Over the next few days, David developed a routine. Morning chores, check on the dragons, back to farm work, evening feeding. More checks throughout the night. Ren's wound was healing slowly. Liss's wing needed to be set properly, but David didn't know how. She couldn't fly, which made her cry in a way that sounded too human. Word spread fast in a small colony. By the end of the first week, David's neighbor Roger showed up at his door. Heard you're keeping lizards in your barn, Roger said. His hand rested on the pistol at his hip. They're hurt, David said. They're kids. They're dragons. You know what dragons can do? They breathe fire, David. They could burn your whole farm down. They haven't. Yet. Roger spat in the dirt. Governor Morris wants them turned over. Colonial security. They'll process them proper. Process them into what? That's not our concern. We got our own people to worry about. David felt anger rising in his throat. They're people, Roger. Scared kids who crashed here running from a war. They're not our kids. Governor's giving you until tomorrow. Then he's sending security to collect them. Roger turned and walked back to his truck. Don't be stupid about this, David. You already lost Sarah. Don't lose everything else over some aliens. That night, David sat in the barn with Ren and Liz. They were getting stronger. Ren could walk now, though he limped. Lice's wing was still useless tomorrow, Liz said quietly. She had been learning more common every day. They will take us tomorrow? I won't let them, David said, though he had no idea how to stop the colonial government. Why do you help us? Ren asked. His voice was deeper than his sister's, but still young. Your people do not want us here. David thought about that. He thought about Sarah, about how she had always said the measure of a person was what they did when no one was watching. What they did when it was hard. Because it's right, he said finally, because you needed help and I could give it. 3 months passed like that. The governor sent security twice, but David had friends too. Old friends from before Sarah died, who remembered he was a good man. They warned him before the security teams arrived, giving him time to hide Ren and Liz in the root cellar or the cornfields. His farm suffered. He spent money on food he couldn't afford. He missed harvest deadlines. His neighbors stopped talking to him except to call him traitor or fool. But Ren and Liz healed. They learned common. They told him stories about the dragon realms, about crystal cities in the clouds and schools where young dragons learned to ride the wind. And then one evening, a ship appeared in the sky. Not falling this time. Descending with purpose, it was a dragon vessel, sleek and beautiful. It landed in David's north field and figures emerged. Adult dragons armored and armed, scanning with devices that blinked and hummed. Liz and Ren saw them and ran from the barn, crying out in their language. The adult dragons answered, and suddenly there was noise and movement everywhere. More dragons emerged from the ship. Someone was giving orders. David stood back and watched. This was it. They were leaving. One of the adults approached him. She was massive, her scales deep emerald green. You are the human who sheltered the younglings? Yes, David said. They say you fed them. Protected them. Expected nothing in return. They needed help. The dragon studied him for a long moment. Then she bowed her head slightly. The dragon realms remember kindness. We do not forget. Liz appeared at David's side. Her eyes were wet. She pressed something into his hand, a small crystalline scale that caught the light like a prism. So we remember, she said. So we never forget. Ren touched David's shoulder with careful claws. Thank you. For seeing us. For caring. David wanted to say something meaningful, something worthy of the moment. Instead, he just said, be safe. Both of you. They left then, walking up the ramp into their ship. Liz looked back once, and David raised his hand in farewell. The ship lifted smoothly, impossibly graceful, and disappeared into the evening sky. David stood in his field for a long time, holding the crystal scale. His farm was a mess. His bank account was empty. Half the colony hated him. But he had done the right thing. He was certain of that. He walked back to his house and placed the scale on the shelf above his kitchen sink, where it caught the last rays of sunlight and threw rainbow patterns across the wall. Tomorrow he would fix the fence. Tomorrow he would figure out how to save his farm. Tomorrow he would deal with reality. Tonight he had helped 2 kids get home. That was enough. 5 years changed everything and nothing at all. David stood in his expanded greenhouse checking the growth monitors on his hybrid tomato plants. The greenhouse had been Ruth's idea, along with most of the improvements that had saved his farm. She had shown up 3 years ago as the colony's new teacher, fresh from Earth with ideas about sustainable agriculture and a smile that made David remember what happiness felt like. They had been dating for 8 months now. Nothing serious yet, or maybe it was serious and David was just too scared to admit it. Sarah's ghost had finally started to fade, helped along by Ruth's patient understanding and her refusal to be compared to anyone. New Hebron had grown too. The population had doubled since the war ended. New buildings lined what people were optimistically calling Main Street. There was talk of applying for full planetary status instead of remaining a frontier colony. David found it all slightly overwhelming. He checked the crystal scale every morning, a ritual he could not break. It sat on his shelf above the sink, exactly where he had placed it 5 years ago. Sometimes it caught the light and painted rainbows across his kitchen. Sometimes David wondered if Ren and Liz even remembered him. They had been kids in crisis. He had been a convenience, nothing more. The comm unit in his pocket buzzed. Ruth's voice came through, excited and slightly breathless. David, turn on the news. Right now. I'm working. The plants need... David. Now. Trust me. He pulled out his tablet and switched to the colony's newsfeed. The headline made his breath stop. Dragon warship enters New Hebron orbit. The video showed a vessel so large it made human ships look like children's toys. It was all elegant curves and crystalline structures, with propulsion that left trails of light across the dark of space. The news anchor was trying to sound calm and failing badly. Colonial authorities have confirmed that a Dragon military vessel, identified as belonging to the Royal Dragon Guard, entered our system approximately 1 hour ago. Governor Morris has issued a statement calling for calm and stating that no hostile intent has been detected. The ship has established orbit and appears to be scanning the surface. We will provide updates as... David's comm buzzed again. This time it was an unknown number. Mr. Chen? The voice was formal, speaking perfect Galactic common with a dragon accent. This is Captain Brahm of the Royal Guard. We request permission to land at your location in 30 minutes. The matter is urgent. What? Why? We will explain upon arrival. Please confirm you are David Chen, agricultural engineer, registered owner of Farm Plot 773. Yes, that's me, but 30 minutes. Mr. Chen, thank you for your cooperation. The line went dead. David stood frozen in his greenhouse, tomato scanner still in his hand, trying to process what had just happened. The Royal Guard, the actual Royal Guard, coming here, to his farm. He ran to his house and tried to make it presentable, which was impossible in 30 minutes. He changed into clean clothes. He called Ruth, who said she was already on her way. He paced. He checked the crystal scale, still on its shelf, as if it might provide answers. 28 minutes later, a dragon shuttle descended from the sky and landed in his north field. The same field where Ren and Liz had crashed 5 years ago. 3 dragons emerged, and David's courage nearly failed him. These were not frightened younglings. These were warriors. They wore armor that looked like it had been grown rather than forged, all flowing lines and impossible strength. The leader was massive, his scales a deep bronze color, with scars across his snout that spoke of battles survived. Behind them came Governor Morris, looking pale and terrified. Several colonial security officers flanked him, hands near their weapons but clearly too scared to draw them. David walked out to meet them. His legs felt weak, but he forced them to move. This was his farm, his home. Whatever this was, he would face it standing. The lead dragon studied him. David Chen? Yes? I am Captain Brahm, commander of the Royal Guard's 7th Wing. The dragon's voice was deep enough to vibrate in David's chest. I must ask you a question of great importance. 5 years ago, did you provide shelter to 2 dragon refugees on this property? David's mouth went dry. Had he broken some law? Were Ren and Liz in trouble? I did. Are they okay? Did something happen to them? Something shifted in Brahm's expression. If dragons could smile, David thought this might be one. They are more than okay, Mr. Chen. Brahm lowered himself, bending one knee to the ground. The 2 guards behind him did the same. Governor Morris made a choking sound. We bring greetings from their Imperial Highnesses, Prince Ren and Princess Liz of the Dragon Realms, 2nd and 3rd in line to the Crystal Throne. Beloved children of Emperor Voreth himself. The world tilted sideways. David heard the words, but they made no sense. Prince, Princess, Emperor. That's not... They were refugees. Just kids who crashed here. They were the Emperor's youngest children, Brahm said, rising back to his full height. Lost during the Scourge's initial attack on the capital. Their transport was damaged, their guards killed. The Emperor believed them dead for 4 months until a rescue ship detected their distress beacon and recovered them from this world. They never said. They were instructed to hide their identity. There were assassins, Scourge agents. Even in their own court, they could not be certain who to trust. Brahm's eyes fixed on David. But they told their father everything about you. About the human who saw 2 frightened younglings and chose compassion over fear, who fed them from his own table when his neighbors turned away, who protected them at cost to himself. David felt like he was drowning. I just helped some kids. That's all. Anyone would have... No, Mr. Chen, most would not. Most did not. Your own colonial government attempted to take them for processing. Your neighbors called you traitor. Brahm's voice held something like respect. But you held firm. You asked nothing in return. You expected no reward. Governor Morris stepped forward, his face red. Captain Brahm, I must protest this characterization. The colonial government was simply trying to follow proper procedures for refugee management. You tried to take the emperor's children and place them in a detention facility. Brahm did not raise his voice. He did not need to. The temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. The emperor is aware of this. He is aware of many things. Morris went pale and stepped back. Brahm returned his attention to David. The emperor himself requests your presence on the Dragon homeworld. He wishes to meet the human who saved his children. He wishes to honor you before the full court. I don't want honor, David said automatically. I didn't do it for that, we know. That is precisely why the emperor wishes to meet you. Brahm reached into a pouch at his side and withdrew a crystalline tablet. This is a formal invitation. You have 1 week to settle your affairs. We will provide transportation. All expenses will be covered by the Imperial Treasury. Ruth's truck pulled up then, and she jumped out, staring at the dragons with wide eyes. She ran to David's side and took his hand. What's happening? They want me to go to the Dragon homeworld, David said, still trying to make it real in his mind. The 2 kids I helped. They were royalty. Ruth looked at him, then at the dragons, then back at him. She squeezed his hand. Then you should go. Ruth, I can't just— David, listen to yourself. The Emperor of the Dragons wants to meet you. This is bigger than us. Bigger than this farm. This is history. She smiled, and it was the same smile that had made him fall for her. Besides, I want to hear every detail when you get back. Brahm handed David the tablet. We will return in 7 days. Be ready, David Chen. You are about to see wonders your species has only dreamed of. The dragons departed, their shuttle lifting silently into the sky. Governor Morris lingered, opening and closing his mouth like a fish, before finally retreating to his vehicle without saying a word. David stood in his field, holding a crystal tablet while Ruth leaned against his shoulder. Above them, the dragon warship hung in orbit like a second moon. 5 years, David said quietly. I fed them vegetables from my garden and told them stories while they healed. How is that worth all this? Maybe it's not about worth, Ruth said. Maybe it's about kindness. About seeing people as people even when they don't look like you. She kissed his cheek. You did something good, David, something rare. Let them say thank you. That night, David packed a small bag. He had no idea what to bring to an imperial court, so he packed practical things. Clean clothes, his toolkit, a picture of Sarah, because she had always been braver than him and he needed that courage now. He picked up the crystal scale from its shelf and held it to the light. It still made rainbows, still reminded him of golden eyes filled with fear, and the choice he had made to help instead of turning away. 7 days later, David Chen boarded a dragon warship bound for a world he had only seen in pictures. Behind him, Ruth waved from his farmhouse porch. Ahead of him, Captain Brahm waited at the airlock, ready to guide a simple farmer into the presence of an emperor. The ship's engines hummed to life, and New Hebron fell away below. David pressed his hand against the viewport and watched his home shrink to a point of light. He had no idea what waited for him among the dragons, but he knew with absolute certainty that he would do it all again. Feed 2 hungry kids, protect them from those who would do harm, ask nothing in return. Some choices defined a person. This had been his. The stars waited ahead, and David Chen flew toward them, carrying the crystal scale in his pocket and the memory of compassion in his heart. David had seen pictures of the dragon homeworld. Every human had. The images were in textbooks and tourist databases, part of the basic galactic education curriculum. But pictures were nothing like reality. The ship descended through clouds that glowed with their own light, past floating islands held aloft by forces David could not begin to understand. Crystal structures grew from the islands like impossible flowers, catching the light of 3 moons and scattering it in colors that had no human names. Below, mountain ranges stretched as far as he could see, their peaks carved into cities that looked like they had grown naturally from the stone. First time seeing Drakenhold? Captain Brahm asked, standing beside David at the viewport. It's beautiful, David said, and the word felt too small. The heart of the dragon realms, 5,000 years of continuous civilization. The oldest structures predate human spaceflight by millennia. Brahm pointed to a massive palace complex built into the largest mountain. The Imperial Palace? That will be your home for the next few days. The ship landed on a platform that extended from the palace itself. David followed Brahm down the ramp and onto crystal that somehow supported his weight without feeling solid. The air smelled of flowers and something else, something electric and alive. A dozen dragons waited in formal rows. When Brahm led David past them, each one pressed a clawed fist to their chest in salute. David had no idea what he was supposed to do, so he nodded awkwardly and tried not to trip over his own feet. The interior of the palace was even more overwhelming than the exterior. Corridors wound like living things, walls carved with scenes from dragon history. Somewhere in the distance, music played, complex harmonies that seemed to come from the stones themselves. They passed other dragons, all of whom stopped to stare at David. Some looked curious, others looked dismissive. A few looked angry, though David could not imagine why. Brahm led him to a suite of rooms that were larger than David's entire house back home. A bed big enough for 3 people dominated one wall. The bathroom had a pool instead of a shower. The balcony overlooked a garden where flowers glowed in the evening light. "These are your quarters," Brahm said. "You will find suitable clothing in the wardrobe. A guide will arrive shortly to help you prepare for tomorrow's audience." "Tomorrow?" David's voice cracked slightly. "I meet the Emperor tomorrow?" "The Emperor is eager to meet you. He has waited 5 years." Brahm moved toward the door, then paused. "David Chen, I must tell you something. My own daughter was lost during the scourge. We never found her. When I heard what you did for the prince and princess, I wept. Not all humans would have made your choice." Before David could respond, Brahm was gone. David explored his rooms in a daze. The clothing in the wardrobe was formal, made from material that shifted colors in the light. He tried on a jacket and felt ridiculous. He was a farmer, not a diplomat. What was he doing here? A knock at the door saved him from his spiraling thoughts. A young dragon entered, smaller than Brahm, with scales that reminded David of autumn leaves. "Mr. Chen, I am Finn, junior scholar of the Imperial Archives. I have been assigned as your guide and translator. I thought Captain Brahm has duties to attend to. I will help you prepare for court." Finn noticed David's expression and his own softened. "You are frightened." "Terrified," David admitted. "Good, that means you understand the significance. Come, sit. We must talk about what tomorrow will bring." They sat on the balcony while the 3 moons rose over Drakenhold. Finn explained Dragon Court etiquette, titles, proper forms of address. It was all too much. David's head spun with rules and protocols. "I'm going to fail," David said finally. "I am going to insult someone or break some ancient tradition and cause an interstellar incident." Finn laughed, a sound like wind chimes. "You will be fine. The Emperor knows you are human. He does not expect you to be dragon." Then his voice grew more serious. "But David Chen, you must understand something. Many dragons do not trust humans. Your species has a reputation for being self-interested, for turning away refugees and closing borders during times of crisis. What happened on New Hebron was not unique. It has happened on thousands of human worlds." "I know," David said quietly. "We are not always kind to outsiders. But you were. Prince Ren and Princess Liz have spent 5 years telling everyone who will listen about the human who saved them. They have argued that humanity deserves a chance, that not all humans are alike. Tomorrow you will be their proof." The weight of it settled on David's shoulders. He was not just representing himself. He was representing his entire species. One farmer from a nowhere colony, suddenly responsible for human-dragon relations. "No pressure," he muttered. Finn smiled again. "The prince and princess wish to see you tonight before the formal audience. They are waiting in the garden. Would you like me to take you to them?" David's heart jumped. "Yes, please." The garden was a maze of glowing plants and flowing water. Finn led David to its heart, where a fountain sprayed water that somehow formed shapes in the air before falling back to its pool. 2 dragons waited there, and David's breath caught. They had grown. Of course they had grown. 5 years was a long time. But Ren now stood as tall as Brahm, his copper scales polished and gleaming. Liz was more delicate, her silver scales catching the moonlight, but there was strength in the way she held herself. They saw David, and for a moment, everyone froze. Then Liz made a sound somewhere between a laugh and a sob and rushed forward. She wrapped her wings around David in an embrace that lifted him off his feet. "You came," she said into his shoulder. "I was afraid you would not come." "I could not say no to the Emperor," David said, but his voice was warm. Ren approached more slowly. He touched David's shoulder with careful claws. "You look older. So do you. Both of you. I barely recognized you." They sat by the fountain and talked. The formality melted away quickly. They were still Ren and Liss, still the frightened younglings who had eaten his vegetable stew and told him stories about cloud cities. But they were also more now. Confident, graceful, royal. Liss still wore a small scar on her arm from where David had bandaged her crash injuries. Ren's wing had healed perfectly, but he remembered everything. How David had changed their bandages every day. How he had taught them card games to pass the time. How he had stood between them and colonial security with nothing but stubborn determination. "Father wants to honor you publicly," Ren said. "He wants the whole court to see what you did." "I do not want to be honored," David said. "I just wanted to help." "We know." Liss took his hand in her claws. "But this is bigger than honor. This is about what comes next. About humans and dragons working together. About changing minds." "Some minds do not wish to be changed," Ren said darkly. "Lord Ash and his faction have opposed every proposal for closer human relations. They believe your species cannot be trusted, can we?" David asked. "Be honest. Based on what you have seen, are they wrong?" Liss and Ren exchanged glances. Finally, Liss spoke. "Humans are complicated. Like all species, you are capable of both great kindness and great cruelty. But we believe you can choose kindness more often. We believe people like you exist everywhere, waiting for a chance to show it. That is why tomorrow matters so much," Ren added. "Father will ask you questions. The court will judge your answers. If you speak truly, if you show them what we saw in you, it could change everything." They talked until the moons reached their peak. Finn eventually came to collect David, reminding him that he needed rest before the audience. David said goodnight to Ren and Liss, promising to make them proud. He lay in his enormous bed staring at the ceiling while his mind raced. Tomorrow he would stand before an emperor and a court full of nobles who did not trust his species. He would be judged not just as David Chen, but as a representative of humanity itself. He thought about his neighbors on New Hebron, the ones who had called him traitor for helping Ren and Liss. He thought about Governor Morris, who had wanted to lock them up. He thought about all the human worlds that had closed their borders during the refugee crisis. Finn had been right. Humans were not always kind to outsiders. David could not defend his species' history, but he could tell the truth about his own choices. He could show them that at least one human had looked at two frightened kids and seen people worth saving. He pulled the crystal scale from his pocket and held it up to catch the moonlight streaming through his window. It still made rainbows, still reminded him of why he was here. Sleep came eventually, fitful and full of dreams about golden eyes and falling ships. When David woke, the 3 moons were setting and a new day was breaking over Drakenhold. Finn arrived with breakfast and helped him dress in the formal clothing. The material felt strange against his skin, too light and too heavy at the same time. "The audience begins in 2 hours," Finn said. "I will walk you through the approach one more time." They practiced. How to enter, where to stand, when to bow. David felt like a child learning to walk, awkward and uncertain. But Finn was patient, correcting without judging. Finally, it was time. Captain Brahm arrived to escort David through the palace. They walked down corridors that grew grander with each step. Other dragons joined the procession, guards and officials in formal armor. David's heart hammered against his ribs. They reached a massive door carved with dragons in flight. Beyond it, David could hear voices, the murmur of a crowd. Brahm turned to face him. "The Emperor will ask you a question, David Chen. When he does, speak from your heart. Do not try to be diplomatic. Do not try to represent your species. Just tell him the truth." The doors opened, and David stepped forward into the throne room of the Dragon Emperor, carrying nothing but his honesty and the memory of 2 hungry kids who had needed his help. The throne room stretched so far that David could barely see the opposite wall. Hundreds of dragons filled the space, arrayed in formal rows on either side of a central carpet that glowed with soft light. Their scales caught the illumination from massive crystal chandeliers overhead, creating a display of colors that made David's eyes water. At the far end, elevated on a dais of white stone, sat Emperor Vorath. David had prepared himself, but nothing could have truly prepared him for this. The Emperor was enormous, easily twice the size of Captain Brahm. His scales were the color of burnished gold, each one the size of David's hand. Age showed in the scars that crisscrossed his body, in the way his eyes held the weight of centuries. He wore a crown that seemed to be made of solidified light, shifting and changing but never losing its form. Behind the Emperor stood Ren and Liss, dressed in formal regalia. They caught David's eye and offered small, encouraging smiles. Brahm walked David down the carpet. Every step felt like an eternity. The assembled nobles watched in silence, their faces unreadable. Some looked curious, others looked hostile. David forced himself to keep breathing. They reached the base of the dais. Brahm bowed deeply and David copied the gesture, hoping he was doing it correctly. "Your Imperial Majesty," Brahm said, his voice carrying through the vast chamber, "I present David Chen, agricultural engineer of the human colony New Hebron, the one who sheltered your children during the scourge." Vorath leaned forward slightly and David felt the full weight of that ancient gaze. The Emperor's eyes were silver like Liss's but deeper, eyes that had watched civilizations rise and fall. David Chen. The Emperor's voice resonated in David's chest, seeming to come from everywhere at once. "For 5 years I have wished to meet you. For 5 years my children have told me stories of your kindness. Now you stand before me and I find myself wondering if words will be sufficient to express my gratitude. Your Majesty, I only did what anyone should, but not what anyone would." Vorath's tone was gentle but firm. "My children were lost to me. I believed them dead. Do you know what that means to a parent? The emptiness, the questions that haunt your sleep. I mourned them for 4 months before learning they still lived." David thought of Sarah, of the hole her death had left in his world. "I understand, Your Majesty. Yes, I believe you do." Vorath settled back on his throne. "When my children were recovered, they spoke of you constantly. The human who saw 2 frightened younglings and chose compassion over fear, who fed them from his own table when his neighbors turned away, who protected them at personal cost." The Emperor raised one massive claw and the murmuring in the room ceased instantly. "Today, before this court and these witnesses, I formally recognize David Chen as friend of the Dragon Realms. Let it be known across all territories that this human acted with honor when honor was needed most, that he preserved the imperial line through simple kindness, that the Dragon Realms owe him a debt that cannot easily be repaid." Ren and Liss stepped forward, each carrying a box. They descended the dais and approached David. Inside Ren's box was a medallion on a heavy chain. Inside Liss's was a document sealed with what looked like crystal. "This medallion grants you safe passage through all dragon territories," Ren said formally. "You will be welcomed as family wherever you travel." "This treaty opens formal diplomatic channels between the Dragon Realms and humanity," Liss added. "Trade routes, cultural exchanges, military alliance, a new era of cooperation." David stared at the treaty, his mind reeling. "Your Majesty, I cannot accept this. I am not a diplomat. I have no authority to—" "The treaty will be negotiated by proper authorities," Vorath said. "But it exists because of you. Because one human showed us that your species is capable of the compassion we value above all else." The Emperor's expression grew more serious. "However, there are those who doubt, who believe one act of kindness does not represent humanity as a whole." A dragon stepped forward from the assembled nobles. He was massive, with scales like volcanic rock marked with old burns and scars. His eyes were hard as stone. "Your Majesty, I must speak." The dragon's voice was harsh, angry. "I am Lord Ash, commander of the Eastern Fleets. I lost 2 sons to human arms dealers during the cavalry conflict. Human ships carried the weapons that killed my children." A ripple of discomfort moved through the assembly. David felt his stomach drop. Ash continued, his gaze fixed on David. "One farmer showing kindness does not erase centuries of human treachery. Humans are self-interested. They close borders when others need help. They profit from suffering. Why should we trust them now?" "Lord Ash raises valid concerns," Vorath said carefully. "David Chen, what say you to these charges?" David's mouth was dry. Every dragon in the room was watching him. He could lie. He could defend humanity with pretty words and diplomatic evasion. But Brahm had told him to speak truth. "Lord Ash is right," David said, and the room erupted in surprised murmurs. Vorath raised a claw for silence. "Explain." Humans can be selfish, David continued, forcing himself to meet the Emperor's gaze. We can be tribal and fearful. During the refugee crisis, most human colonies did close their borders. My own colony tried to take Ren and Liz for detention. Many of my neighbors called me a traitor for helping them. Then you admit your species cannot be trusted? Ash demanded. No, I admit we are flawed. All species are. David took a breath. I cannot defend humanity's entire history. I cannot speak for billions of people across thousands of worlds. I can only tell you about my own choice. When 2 frightened kids crashed near my farm, I saw people who needed help. I had food to share, shelter to offer, so I shared it. And you expected no reward? Vorath asked. I expected nothing. I did it because it was right. Because when someone is hungry and scared and you have the power to help, you help. That is what my wife taught me before she died. That is what I tried to live by. David felt his courage building. You ask if humans can be trusted. I say some can. Some will choose kindness when it is hard. Some will see people as people no matter what they look like. I'm not special, Your Majesty. I am just a farmer who made one good choice. But I believe there are millions of humans like me, people who want to do better, who want to be better. Pretty words, Ash said. But words are easy. How do we know you speak truth? Test me, David said, the words escaping before he could stop them. If you do not believe me, test me. Prove I am lying or prove I am honest. But do not judge all of humanity by the actions of the worst of us. Judge us by what we could be. Silence fell over the throne room. David realized he had just challenged a war hero in front of the entire court. He waited for guards to drag him away, for the Emperor to strike him down. Instead, Vorath stood. The room seemed to shrink around him as he descended the dais. He stopped before David, close enough that David could see his own reflection in those ancient scales. You have courage. David Chen, more than most. The Emperor looked at Ash. Lord Ash, your grief is valid. Your anger is understood. But this human speaks with honesty that cannot be faked. He admits his species' flaws while claiming their potential. That is wisdom. Words are still just words, Ash insisted. Then let him prove them, Vorath said. Lord Ash, you may test David Chen. 3 challenges of your choosing. If he passes, we proceed with the alliance. If he fails, we reconsider. Ash's eyes gleamed. 3 challenges. He must demonstrate strength, wisdom, and heart. These are the qualities dragons value. If humans possess them, let their representative prove it. Your Majesty, David started. Do you accept the challenges? Vorath asked. David thought about Ruth waiting back home. He thought about all the humans who might benefit from an alliance with dragons. He thought about Ren and Liz, who had believed in humanity enough to argue for this chance. I accept. The court erupted in discussion. Ren and Liz looked worried. Brahm's expression was unreadable. Ash looked satisfied, like a predator who had cornered its prey. Vorath raised a claw for silence. The challenges will begin tomorrow. The court is dismissed. As the nobles filed out, Ren and Liz hurried to David's side. Why did you do that? Liz asked. You did not have to accept. Yes, I did, David said. If I refused, Ash would say humans are cowards. This way, at least there is a chance. Ash will not make the challenges easy, Ren warned. He wants you to fail. I know. Brahm approached, his expression grave. The challenges will test you beyond anything you have experienced. Strength, wisdom, heart. Dragons have trained their entire lives for such tests and failed. I am just a farmer, David said quietly. But I am a farmer who once chose kindness over fear. Maybe that is enough. That night, alone in his rooms, David stood on his balcony and looked out over Drakenhold. The crystal cities glowed in the darkness, beautiful and alien. Somewhere out there, Lord Ash was planning challenges designed to break him. David pulled out the crystal scale, holding it up to catch the moonlight. It still made rainbows, still reminded him of 2 frightened kids who had needed his help. He had not asked for this, had not wanted to be a symbol or a test case. He had just wanted to feed 2 hungry children. But life rarely asked permission before changing direction. Tomorrow he would face challenges designed for dragons. Tomorrow he would either prove humanity's worth or confirm their worst reputation. Tomorrow everything would change. But tonight David Chen was still just a farmer from New Hebron, holding a crystal scale and remembering that kindness was its own reward, regardless of what came next. He slept fitfully, dreaming of tests he could not pass and consequences he could not escape. When dawn broke over Drakenhold, David woke with determination settling in his bones. He would face the challenges. He would give everything he had. And whatever happened, he would do it with honesty and courage. That would have to be enough. The arena had been carved from living rock at some point in the distant past. Stone benches rose in tiers filled with dragons who had come to watch the human either prove himself or fail spectacularly. David stood in the center of the circular floor feeling very small and very alone. Lord Ash descended from the nobles section, landing with a thump that shook the ground. He carried himself like a warrior, every movement speaking of controlled violence. "The first challenge tests strength," Ash announced, his voice carrying to every corner of the arena. "Not merely physical power, but the strength to face what you cannot defeat. To know when to stand and when to yield." A gate at the far end of the arena opened. Through it walked a dragon warrior in full battle armor. He was young, maybe close to Ren's age, but built like a fortress. Muscles rippled under crimson scales. His eyes were sharp and focused. "This is my nephew, Reed," Ash said. "He has trained in combat since he could walk. You will face him in the circle. The match ends when one combatant yields or cannot continue." David stared at the warrior dragon. Reed was twice his size, armed with natural weapons that could tear through steel. There was no way David could win a direct fight. Everyone knew it. That was the point. "I accept the challenge," David said, because there was nothing else to say. Reed stepped into the circle, taking a combat stance. David had no combat training. He knew how to fix tractors and grow tomatoes. He knew how to bandage wounds and cook stew. Fighting a dragon warrior was so far outside his capabilities that it was almost funny. Almost. The match began. Reed moved with terrifying speed, closing the distance in 2 bounds. David threw himself sideways, barely avoiding a strike that would have ended the fight immediately. He rolled to his feet and backed away, trying to create space. Reed followed, patient and methodical. He was not trying to hurt David seriously. This was a test, not an execution. But that did not make the claws any less sharp or the strength any less overwhelming. David's mind raced. He could not match Reed's strength or speed. But he knew something about his opponent. Reed was following forms, patterns drilled through years of training. He attacked with precision and control. David stopped retreating. He stood his ground, watching Reed's movements. When the next strike came, David moved just enough to let it pass by his shoulder. He stayed close, inside Reed's reach, where the dragon's size became a disadvantage. Reed adjusted, using shorter movements. David responded in kind, reading his opponent's body language. He was still losing, still taking glancing hits that would leave bruises, but he was lasting longer than anyone expected. Minutes passed. David's legs burned. His lungs screamed. A strike clipped his shoulder and sent him stumbling. He caught himself and came back up. "You cannot win," Reed said quietly, not unkindly. "I know," David replied, "but I am not trying to win." He saw understanding flash in Reed's eyes. This was not about victory. It was about demonstrating strength of character, about refusing to quit even when the outcome was certain. David pressed forward, no longer trying to avoid every strike. He took hits that made his vision blur, but he kept moving, kept fighting. His body was reaching its limits, but his will had not broken. Finally, Reed landed a controlled blow that sent David to his knees. The younger dragon loomed over him, ready to finish the match. David looked up at him, breathing hard, blood dripping from a split lip. "I yield." The crowd's reaction was mixed. Some murmured in disappointment. Others seemed impressed. Reed offered David his claw and helped him to his feet. "You fought with honor," Reed said. Many would have yielded immediately. Lord Ash landed beside them. His expression was unreadable. "You lost." "I did," David agreed, still catching his breath, "but you did not quit. You faced an opponent you could not defeat and showed courage." Ash's tone softened slightly. "The first challenge is past. Strength is not merely power. It is also the will to stand when falling would be easier." Relief flooded through David, followed immediately by exhaustion. Finn appeared at his side with water and bandages. "You need rest before the next challenge." "How long do I have?" 1 hour. They moved to a preparation chamber where Finn tended David's injuries. Nothing was broken, but he would be sore for days. Ren and Liz visited briefly, their expressions worried. "2 more challenges," Liz said. "Wisdom and heart." "I am not wise," David said. "I am just a farmer." "Sometimes farmers know things scholars forget," Ren replied. The hour passed too quickly. David returned to the arena. his body protesting every movement. The crowd had grown larger. Word had spread that the human had passed the first challenge. Now they wanted to see if he could pass the second. Lord Ash stood in the center with a scroll. The second challenge tests wisdom. Dragons have studied the riddle of sacrifice for 3,000 years. Scholars debate its meaning still. You will have one chance to answer correctly. He read from the scroll. A guardian stands at a bridge over endless darkness. Behind the guardian are 2 doors. One door leads to salvation. One door leads to destruction. Both doors will open if someone crosses the bridge. But the bridge can only support one more crossing before it collapses. The guardian knows which door is which but cannot speak. How does the guardian save what matters most? The riddle hung in the air. David could feel hundreds of eyes on him. This was a test dragons had been debating for millennia. What could he possibly say that had not been said before? He thought about it. Thought about bridges and guardians and sacrifice. He thought about standing between Ren and Liss and colonial security 5 years ago. He thought about choosing to help even when it cost him. The guardian crosses the bridge, David said finally. The guardian sacrifices themselves by crossing, collapsing the bridge so neither door can be opened. What matters most is not salvation or destruction. It is preventing the wrong choice from being made at all. Silence filled the arena. Then a voice from the nobles section spoke. It was an ancient dragon, scales white with age. That is the answer I gave 300 years ago. The answer I was told was incorrect, another voice, younger. I answered that the guardian should mark the correct door before the bridge collapses. More voices joined in, dragons debating the riddle as they had for centuries. Lord Ash raised a claw for silence. The riddle has no single correct answer, Ash said. It is designed to reveal how one thinks about sacrifice and responsibility. You chose to have the guardians sacrifice themselves rather than risk the wrong choice. Why? David thought about Sarah, about the hole her death had left, about choosing to live anyway, to keep trying, to help others even when it hurt. Because sometimes the right choice is not about winning, David said. Sometimes it is about preventing harm, even at cost to yourself. The guardian's job is not to succeed. It is to protect. And protection sometimes means sacrifice. Ash studied him for a long moment. You speak from experience. My wife died 2 years before I met Ren and Liss. I could have closed myself off. Could have decided helping others was too painful, too risky. But she taught me that meaning comes from connection. From choosing others over yourself when it matters. David's voice was steady. The guardian crosses the bridge because that is what guardians do. The ancient white dragon spoke again. This human understands the riddle better than most dragons. His answer reveals wisdom born from loss and love. Ash nodded slowly. The second challenge is passed. You have shown wisdom that comes not from books but from living. 2 challenges down, 1 to go. David's exhaustion was bone deep now, but he forced himself to remain standing. The third challenge tests heart, Ash announced. It is the most difficult. Many dragons have failed it. Screens materialized in the air, showing images from across the galaxy. Refugee camps overflowing with displaced families. War-torn worlds struggling to rebuild. Medical stations overwhelmed by plague victims. Orphanages packed with children who had lost everything. You have resources, Ash said. Enough to save one group. Only one. Choose. David stared at the images. Thousands of beings all suffering, all needing help. How could anyone choose? How could anyone decide which life mattered more? His mind raced through options. Save the most people? Save the youngest? Save those most likely to survive? Every choice felt wrong. Every choice meant abandoning someone who needed help. The crowd watched in silence. This was the challenge that broke most candidates. The impossible choice. David thought about his farm. About the night Ren and Liss had crashed. About his neighbors telling him to turn them away because they did not have resources to waste on aliens. I refuse to choose, David said. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Ash's eyes narrowed. You must choose. That is the challenge. No, I refuse. David's voice grew stronger. I refuse to decide that some lives matter more than others. I do not have that right. No one does. Then you fail the challenge. Maybe, but I have a different answer. David pointed at the screens. With your ships, our supplies, dragon strength, and human ingenuity, we do not have to choose. We save everyone. That is impossible. Why? Because we have always worked separately. Because dragons and humans have never truly cooperated? David turned to address the entire arena. You have technology we lack. We have numbers you need. Separately, we can only save a few. Together, we could save them all. He looked back at Ash. You lost sons to human weapons. I lost my wife to accident and chance. We both know grief. We both know loss. And we both know that grief does not end by inflicting it on others. It ends by preventing it where we can. David's voice rang out clear. The answer is not choosing who lives. The answer is refusing to accept that anyone must die. The answer is cooperation. It is idealistic and maybe naive, but it is honest. And it is what I believe. The arena erupted in debate. Dragons argued with each other. Some calling David's answer cowardly, others calling it visionary. The noise built until Emperor Vorath himself stood from his seat. Silence fell instantly. David Chen, Vorath's voice carried across the arena. You have passed all 3 challenges. Not by being strong, wise, or compassionate in the ways we expected, but by showing us different kinds of strength, wisdom, and heart, by showing us that humanity at its best offers something we have forgotten, hope for impossible things. Lord Ash stood motionless, his expression complex. Finally, he approached David. I wanted you to fail. I wanted proof that humans cannot be trusted. But you have shown me something else. You have shown me that perhaps trust must be given before it can be earned, that perhaps my grief has made me blind to possibility. He extended his claw to David. You have my respect, human, and my apology. David shook the offered claw, almost too tired to comprehend what was happening. Vorath descended to the arena floor. I formally establish the Dragon-Human Alliance. David Chen has proven that our peoples can work together, that together we are stronger than apart. The Emperor looked at Ren and Liss. My children, you have argued for 5 years that humans deserve a chance. Today, one human has proven you correct. What say you now? Ren stepped forward. We wish to return with David to New Hebron, to serve as ambassadors, to build the alliance from the ground where it began. The place where kindness first bridged our peoples, Liss added. Let it become a symbol of what we can create together. Vorath considered this, then nodded. So be it. Captain Brahm approached David as the crowd began to disperse. You changed history today, David Chen. I just tried to be honest, David replied, his legs finally giving out. He sat heavily on the arena floor. I just tried to do what seemed right. That, Brahm said with something that might have been a smile, is why it worked. The journey home took 3 days, and David spent most of it sleeping. His body needed time to heal from the challenges, but more than that, his mind needed rest. He had gone from farmer to symbol of human-dragon cooperation in less than a week. The weight of it was crushing. Ren and Liss traveled on the same ship, along with Captain Brahm and a diplomatic delegation of 12 other dragons. They were heading to New Hebron to establish the first permanent dragon presence in human space. The place where 2 refugee children had crashed would become a bridge between civilizations. On the 2nd day, David was well enough to walk without wincing. He found Liss on the observation deck watching stars stream past. Nervous? David asked, joining her at the viewport. Terrified, Liss admitted. When we crashed on New Hebron, we were children running for our lives. Now we return as representatives of our people. What if we fail? What if we cannot make this work? Then we try again. And again, until we get it right, David smiled. That is what you taught me, you know. That trying matters more than succeeding. We taught you that. You crashed on my farm scared and hurt, and you kept going anyway. You survived when others would have given up. You showed me what courage really looks like. Liss was quiet for a moment. Humans are more complex than I expected. Some of your people hate us, fear us. They will make this difficult. Yes, David agreed. But some will welcome you. Some will see what I see. People, not monsters. Friends, not threats. He looked at her. It will not be easy, but nothing worth doing ever is. When the ship finally entered New Hebron's orbit, David felt a strange mix of relief and anxiety. This was home, but home was about to change in ways he could barely imagine. The ship landed in David's North Field, exactly where Ren and Liss had crashed 5 years ago. A crowd had gathered, kept back by colonial security. News of the alliance had spread ahead of them. Some people held signs welcoming the dragons. Others held signs demanding they leave. Governor Morris waited at the edge of the landing zone, looking uncomfortable in formal clothing. When David descended the ramp, Morris actually bowed. Mr. Chen, welcome home. The colony is honored by your return and grateful for your service to human-dragon relations. David stared at him. This was the same man who had tried to take Ren and Liz for detention. The same man who had called David a fool for helping them. Save it, Morris. I did not do this for you or for the colony. I did it because it was right. Morris flushed but held his tongue. Ruth broke through the security line and ran to David, throwing her arms around him. He held her tight, breathing in the familiar smell of her hair, feeling tension drain from his shoulders. You look terrible, Ruth said, pulling back to examine his face. And you have bruises everywhere. Long story. I will tell you everything. Ren and Liz emerged from the ship, followed by the diplomatic delegation. The crowd's reaction was immediate and divided. Some cheered. Others booed. A few people pushed forward aggressively before security intervened. This is going to be harder than we thought, Ruth murmured. Yes, David agreed, but we knew it would be. The delegation established a compound on land adjacent to David's farm. Prefabricated buildings were assembled quickly, along with communications equipment and defensive systems. The dragons were taking no chances. If someone tried to attack the delegation, they would be ready. David tried to return to his normal routine, but normal was gone forever. Reporters requested interviews daily. Government officials wanted briefings. Activists on both sides sent messages ranging from grateful to threatening. His farm had become ground zero for human-dragon relations, whether he wanted it or not. 3 weeks after returning home, the first major test came. A ship arrived carrying human refugees from a mining colony that had suffered a catastrophic equipment failure. 200 people needed temporary shelter while repairs were made. They had nowhere else to go. An emergency meeting was called in the colony's town hall. David attended, sitting near the back, trying to be invisible. Governor Morris stood at the front looking nervous. The refugee ship has requested landing clearance, Morris announced. However, our resources are limited. We are already supporting the Dragon delegation. Food supplies are stretched. Housing is at capacity. The council must vote on whether to accept these refugees. Arguments erupted immediately. Some colonists insisted they had a duty to help fellow humans. Others claimed they could not afford it, that they needed to take care of their own first. David listened to the debate with growing frustration. It was the same argument that had happened 5 years ago when Ren and Liz needed help. The same fears, the same excuses. Finally, he stood. I have something to say. The room quieted. Everyone knew who he was now. The farmer who had befriended dragon royalty. The human who had passed the challenges. 5 years ago, David said, his voice carrying to every corner of the hall, 2 scared kids crashed near my farm. Most of you told me to turn them away. You said we did not have resources to waste on aliens. You said we needed to take care of our own first. He looked around the room, meeting eyes. Today, a ship carrying our own people asked for the same help I gave those 2 kids. And I am hearing the same arguments. The same fears. The same willingness to turn away people who need us. Governor Morris shifted uncomfortably. Several colonists looked at the floor. I am not special, David continued. I am just a farmer who made one good choice. But I learned something from that choice. I learned that resources mean nothing if we will not share them. That strength means nothing if we will not help the weak. That humanity means nothing if we are not humane. He pointed toward the compound where the dragons were housed. Right now, Ren and Liz are watching this meeting. They are learning about humans. About who we are when tested. About whether we practice what we preach. David's voice grew stronger. They are offering us trade agreements, technology exchanges, medical advancements that could save thousands of lives. But more than that, they are offering friendship, partnership, a chance to be part of something bigger than our own small fears. He looked at Morris directly. 5 years ago, you wanted to lock them up. Today, you get to make a different choice. We all do. We can accept these refugees and ask our dragon neighbors for help. Or we can turn them away and show the galaxy that humans only help when it is convenient. Silence hung in the hall. Then a voice spoke from the back. It was Roger, David's neighbor who had confronted him years ago. I was wrong, Roger said, standing. 5 years ago, I called you a fool for helping those dragons. I was wrong. I vote to accept the refugees, and I will volunteer to help house them. Others began to stand, adding their voices. Not everyone. Some colonists remained seated, their expressions hostile, but enough stood to make a difference. Governor Morris called for a vote. The refugees would be accepted, As people filed out of the hall, Liz appeared at David's side. That was brave. That was necessary. If we want this alliance to work, we have to show you who we can be, not who we have been. We would like to help, Liz said, with the refugees. We have supplies, medical equipment. Our engineers could assist with temporary housing. David smiled. I was hoping you would offer. The next few days were chaos. The refugee ship landed. Temporary shelters were erected. Dragons worked alongside humans, their strength and technology speeding processes that would have taken weeks. Children who had been taught to fear dragons found themselves playing with dragon younglings, who had arrived with the delegation. Barriers began to break down. Not everywhere. Not for everyone. Some colonists remained hostile. There were protests. A few incidents where someone threw rocks at the dragon compound, though no serious harm was done. The alliance was fragile, built on hope and held together by determination. But it was real. 2 months after David's return, he and Ruth married. The ceremony was held in David's field under open sky. Both humans and dragons attended. Ren and Liz stood as honored guests, wearing formal robes that caught the afternoon light. Ruth wore a dress with a brooch made from the crystal scale Liz had given David 5 years ago. It caught the sun and scattered rainbows across the grass. During the ceremony, David looked out at the assembled guests, human and dragon together, and felt something shift in his chest. This was what mattered. Not grand gestures or historic alliances, simple moments of connection. People choosing to see past difference and find common ground. The reception lasted into the evening. Music played, a blend of human and dragon traditions that should not have worked but somehow did. David danced with Ruth while dragons performed aerial displays overhead that left everyone breathless. Late in the evening, when most guests had departed, David found himself sitting with Ren, Liz, and Captain Brom near the garden behind his house. Stars were coming out overhead, sharp and bright in New Hebron's clear sky. I have been thinking, Brom said, his voice thoughtful, about the day I came to your farm with the invitation. You could have refused. You could have sent us away, but you came. Of course I came. How could I refuse? Many would have. The journey was dangerous, the outcome uncertain. You had no obligation to help us again. Brom looked at David. Why did you do it? Not 5 years ago when you fed 2 hungry children. But this time, when it became about politics and alliances and representing your species? David considered the question. He looked at Ren and Liz, who were no longer frightened refugees, but confident young adults ready to shape the future. He looked at his farm, at the compound in the distance where dragons and humans were learning to live together. He looked at Ruth's brooch, still catching starlight. Because the first time I helped, I saw 2 people who needed me, David said finally. The second time, I saw millions of people, human and dragon both, who needed someone to bridge the gap. To show that cooperation was possible, I am not special, but I was in a position to help, so I helped. You keep saying you are not special, Liz said, but you are wrong. What makes you special is that you do not think you are. You see what needs to be done and you do it. No grandstanding, no expectation of reward, just quiet, determined kindness. That is what will save both our peoples, Ren added. Not treaties or trade agreements. Those are important, but they are built on foundation, and the foundation is people like you choosing compassion over fear. They sat in comfortable silence watching stars wheel overhead. In the distance, David could hear laughter from the compound. A dragon was teaching human children to sing one of their traditional songs. The children's voices mixed with deeper dragon harmonies, creating something new. What happens next? David asked. More delegations, Brom said. Other colonies requesting dragon ambassadors. Human students accepted to our academies. Trade routes opening. Cultural exchanges. 1,000 small connections that add up to lasting change. And us? Liz gestured to herself and Ren. We stay here. This is where it started. This is where we build. You will face opposition, David warned. Not everyone will accept this. We know, Ren said. But you taught us something 5 years ago. You taught us that one person choosing kindness can change everything, that you do not need everyone to agree. You just need enough people willing to try. David thought about his farm, his quiet life before 2 dragons fell from the sky. He thought about the choice he had made, the one that had led to everything else. Feed 2 hungry kids or turn them away? Such a simple decision. Such profound consequences. I just fed 2 hungry kids, he said quietly. That is all I did. No, Ruth said, appearing behind him with glasses of wine. She handed them around and raised her own. You showed them that someone cared. That they mattered. That kindness exists even in dark times. That is worth more than you know. She raised her glass higher. To David, who saw people, not monsters. Who chose courage over fear. Who changed the galaxy by doing one small good thing. To David, the others echoed, raising their glasses. David raised his own glass, feeling embarrassed and proud in equal measure. To doing what is right, he amended. Even when it is hard. Especially when it is hard. They drank as stars wheeled overhead and the night deepened. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. There would be setbacks and struggles. The alliance was young and fragile. But it was real, built on foundation of compassion and maintained by people willing to try. In the compound, a dragon child laughed at something a human child said. In New Hebron's town center, the first joint human-dragon business was preparing to open. In orbit, ships from both species passed each other with friendly greetings instead of suspicion. Small changes, small moments of connection. It had started with 2 hungry kids and 1 farmer willing to share his food. It had grown into something neither species could have imagined alone. And it would continue growing. One small act of kindness at a time. David looked at the crystal scale on Ruth's dress, still catching starlight and making rainbows. He remembered golden eyes filled with fear. He remembered making a choice that felt so small at the time. He had just wanted to help. He had not known it would lead here, to this moment, this future. But he would make the same choice again. Every time. Because some choices define who you are. And David Chen, farmer from New Hebron, had chosen to be kind. That was enough. That would always be enough. That was everything.